Estranged, the hail that started as gentle taps on the glass now increased in size, growing heavier and more violent as dusk fell on the old Victorian manor. Jimmy stood at the large picture window, watching the hearse get battered as it wound its way down the gravel driveway. The chatter behind him from shrouded and hooded strangers who glanced at him now and then made him feel out of place in the large home he was about to inherit if the lord of the manor, who was in a coma, became deceased. The funeral and the interment in the sprawling acreage behind the manor had been a blur of murmured condolences, the scent of lilac, and the hollow thud of earth upon the ornate casket in the hole that was excavated among the tombs of generations of deceased family members resting in the private family plot. Jimmy had found himself in the manor as a result of his search for relatives on a DNA website after his mom had passed away a year earlier. She had kept him isolated from the rest of the world in the little village in El Salavo, surrounded by the loving and kind villagers he had grown up with. Jimmy's mom had forbidden him from asking about or mentioning his father. She had never spoken of her origins or why she had moved to this most remote part of the world with her newborn baby, as if she had been running away from her past. After his mom had passed away with her heavily guarded secret, Jimmy decided to move to a city 100 miles away and use the internet to solve the mystery that had haunted him since he was a child playing with the village kids instead of his cousins. Jimmy's first contact with the estate's legal representatives had created more questions than answers and had deepened the uncertainty surrounding his existence. Two delegates from the estate had visited him and had told him of his mother's dying wish to see him before she passed away. They had scuttled him onto a flight to rush him to her deathbed to fulfill her last wish, but she had died before they had arrived at the manor. Lady Huckstead was the last of the relations by marriage to the bloodline of lords who occupied the extra-large Victorian residence. Jimmy's head swirled with confusion. How could Lady Huckstead be his mother when he had already buried the only mother he had ever known? Yet he believed that DNA evidence was foolproof. Did his mother live a double life? Was he burying her a second time in a year? If she had never left his side, how could she be in two places at the same time? Jimmy wondered if the sudden storm that interrupted the burial and sent everyone scattering toward the manor held an ominous message for him. He assumed that the gravediggers would return after the storm was over to complete the entombment. Jimmy's nails bit into his flesh from the pressure of his clenched fists. He hoped that the pain would yank him out of the nightmare in which he was trapped. He turned around and stared at the mingling mourners taking sandwiches and liquid refreshments off the caterer's trays during the after-funeral reception. Like his life, the funeral was incomplete, interrupted by unforeseen factors. The upside-down red crosses hanging from coarse black chains around their necks worried him. The occasional glance with a nod and a smile at him seemed forced and sinister. Pretending to ask for directions to the bathroom, Jimmy slipped away in search of Lord Huckstead, his supposed father, who was lying in the main chamber upstairs, paralyzed by a stroke for the past 10 years. He wandered the hallways in search of a stairway. He passed walls lined with sepia-toned family portraits. Each one seemed to watch him, eyes following as he passed. His mother's presence seemed to linger in every dark corner, threatening to jump out at him in anger for exploring territory that she had prohibited him from entering. He jumped every time the thunderous, raging storm rattled the windows, making the house groan and shift. He shivered, though not from cold. It was then he noticed the mirror at the end of the hallway. It was tall, framed in ornate blackwood, its surface clouded with age. Drawn by an inexplicable urge, he approached. His reflection seemed distorted, and the shadows behind him appeared to take on a life of their own, making subtle, barely detectable movements. It was as if the mirror was revealing to him the ghosts of generations that still walked the halls of the mansion. He found the stairs around a corner and climbed them, heart pounding, pausing and glancing behind after each step creaked under his weight and echoed along the hallway. The master bedroom door at the top of the stairs unlocked itself with a metallic click. It swung open a few inches to allow Jimmy to glimpse into its interior. His blood ran cold in his veins when a soft snore drew his attention to the center of an extra-large four-poster bed in the middle of the room. Lord Huckstead, bald head and long flowing white beard on a small framed, bony body barely rising above the level of the mattress, lay on his back, struggling to breathe. His wide-open eyes terrified Jimmy. They stared at the ceiling even though he appeared to be sleeping. The door swung further open, an invitation for Jimmy to enter. He stepped inside and gasped when the door closed behind him with a soft click. A chilly wind swirled around like a twister, wrapping him in its embrace. "Get out now!" A loud raspy voice whispered in his ear. The foul breath of rotted flesh touched his cheek and burned his nostrils. "They have just discovered that you are missing. What's happening?" Jimmy heard his voice in his head even though his lips never moved. "They have to sacrifice you because of a pledge." Jimmy heard the key turn in the lock on the inside of the door. "This will buy you some time, but they will break the door down. They must carry out the ritualistic sacrifice tonight for me to live forever. They're here." Jimmy's heart raced when he heard the squeak of the first step. "Get out now!" The window opened, and the bedsheet covering Lord Huckstead slid off his body and started to twirl into a rope. It tied itself onto the center post of the window and dropped itself into the garden below. "Go before they run around the grounds outside in search of you." His voice softened. "I love your mother and cannot live without her. You must live so that I can die to be with her." A tear accompanied the feeble smile that crossed his face. The first bang on the door broke Jimmy out of his paralysis. He sprang over to the window and grabbed the rope. He heard them running back down the stairs after they yelled that he would try to escape through the window. His palms burned from the friction of sliding down the bedsheet. Jimmy sprinted into the woods behind the mansion, with his hands covering his head against the hailstorm that pounded him. He came to a country lane at the edge of the property. He crossed over to the other side where the sun shone brightly. The storm was limited to the property line of the mansion. A visit to the library a day later revealed that Jimmy was the only child of Lord and Lady Huckstead who belonged to a cult. She had pledged the life of her firstborn to achieve wealth and power. Her reward was catching the eye of the handsome young lord of the manor, who fell hopelessly in love with her. 9 months later, hours after their child was born, he vanished without a trace, putting his parents' chance at immortality at risk. Because they did not fulfill their obligations, Lady Huckstead had died from colon cancer, and Lord Huckstead was stricken by a blood clot in his brain, resulting in a stroke. Lady Huckstead had an estranged twin sister who, with the secret financial help of Lord Huckstead, disappeared at the same time as the baby. Extended searches failed to locate the aunt, who sacrificed her life to protect and raise her nephew against the death wish imposed on him by his ambitious and selfish mother. Jimmy switched to the news and read about the lightning strike that burned the mansion to the ground, trapping the mourners within its walls. Everyone perished in the fire. He returned to his village to bask in the arms of the people who loved him and the precious memories of the woman who was more than a mother to him. He thanked his father, whose love for his son had sacrificed his chance for eternal life by saving him not once, but twice. With a tear in his eye, Jimmy closed the DNA website and the old chapter in his life. A new beginning of a simple life in his little village awaited him.